Welcome. Welcome to my dungeon.
Welcome to Cauldron Script. I'm your host, Master Cauldron. If you're new to the show, we are combined 30 years of BDSM experience and my 20 years working in the psychology field to dispel myths, get rid of stereotypes, and answer your questions about BDSM. You can call in at 865-268-4005 to leave your questions or visit the crypt at cauldronscript.com. In this episode of the Crypt, we're learning about the federal laws defining consent and decriminalizing BDSM from the executive director and spokesperson of the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, Miss Susan Wright, returning to the show. Yes, this is a very important episode that we have a lot of new information, things that are brand new to me. Hello, Mayfair.
Hello, Cauldron.
How are you doing today?
Pretty excited. It's probably the biggest name out that we've had on the show since I've been here.
Yeah, this is her first visit was back in season 2, episode 21. You can find that at cauldronscript.com/221. There is a link in the description in the show notes so that you can go back and listen to that, where we get into a lot of her background and information, even dive into some of her kinks and things. So be sure to check that out so you can get to know her. She's not just somebody that stands up for us, but is definitely one of us. Let me hit those rules to love by and jump into this conversation, because this is one of those times where one of those rare times that I get starstruck, because she is such a superstar, a rock star within our world, and just so important. So rules to love by, brought to you by Inclusion Woodworks, my personal woodworking resin company. Check it out, inclusionwoodworks.com. Rules to love by: rule number 1, safe, sane, consensual, and informed. Rule number 2, kinky. That's K-N-K-I. That comes from the Kinky app, available on all platforms, but they're not a sponsor. It stands for knowledge, no intolerance, kindness, and integrity. And rule number 3, the quote from Mr. Paul Young: submission is not about authority, and it is not about obedience. It is all about relationships of love and respect. Hello, Susan.
Hi.
And how are you today?
I'm doing really good. How about you?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you so much for joining us and educating us, for fighting for our freedoms and everything that it is that you and the National Coalition of Sexual Freedom stands for and does. So thank you. Tell us why you're here. What is the new thing that we need to know about?
The big thing that we're talking about is explicit prior permission. And, the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom is a coalition of over 100 groups that serve our communities. So we're a true grassroots organization. We go to the communities. We spent over 15 years working on this project. It's where we gathered information from everyone on what consent meant when it comes to power exchange, BDSM. And, we really wanted to reflect what our community believed. So, SSC, as you said, safe, sane, and consensual. When I came up, that was the big thing, because it helped us guide our own relationships as well as explain what it was that we were doing. And then since then, we've had RAC, PRIC, 4Cs, but now we have explicit prior permission. And the reason this is so important is that explicit prior permission is now a new legal framework. It's in the Model Penal Code on Sexual Assault. So when they revised the Model Penal Code on Sexual Assault, it's kind of the model laws that the American Law Institute creates. The last one was 1962. So you can imagine just how awful that model law is. So now, all the states,
real quick, we'll talk about the Model Penal Code. What is that for people who may not know?
Well, the American Law Institute is this body of legal scholars, professors, judges, and they create the model laws, and they adapt the model laws because, society changes. And so we need to change these model laws. And then each of the 50 states adopts all or part of these model laws in their state legislatures. So what's happened is, because it was so long ago and is so outdated in what was considered sexual assault, 50 states have come up with 50 different laws based on that old law and updated through the years. So some states have a really affirmative definition of consent for just, sexual activity. And other states have no definition of consent. They're like arresting people for sexual assault, and it's a difficult way to judge. It has to usually be like, they resisted, they fought back, something like that, rather than reflecting what our true understanding is today. So these model laws are really important. It's, the next step is to go on and get states to adopt it. But for our section, explicit prior permission, it's even doubly important, because they said that this should replace the old case law. And the old case law is like appeals from courts, and any kind of appellate case involving BDSM, the courts said consent is not a defense. So really, we've been in a legal gray area all these decades. It's really been criminal to do any kind of kink, but prosecutors stopped prosecuting people because there's millions of us doing it, right? But the problem is that it's also impossible to judge when something is consensual or non-consensual. So we have a lot of predators come into our community because they know if they claim they're kinky and they abuse somebody and they go to the police will just be like, what do you expect? You were doing kink. So that's really had a giant effect on our entire community. We've had to self-regulate. We can't report, crime in a kink context. So this is going to transform things. So everybody needs to know about it. It's already being introduced in court cases instead of case law. Yeah. So even if your state hasn't adopted it yet, if you get involved in some kind of non-consensual activity that involves kink, this could be introduced, and then you'll be held to this standard.
So I know you worked with or spoke a lot with one of our local kinksters here in Tennessee back a few years ago. And if this had been in place at that time, that could have had a great effect on the outcome of that situation. Yeah, which you didn't have permission to speak about that. So
yeah, no, definitely. I think there's a lot of cases. NCSF helps hundreds of people every year, and the main thing we're helping is with reports of consent incidents, whether it's groups or individuals have been accused of a consent incident, or they've experienced a consent incident and they want to go and report it to the police. And it's been very, very difficult. Very difficult. That's why we have to self-police so hard, self-regulate our own group so hard, because we'll take video evidence in of somebody saying red. And the prosecutor will be like, well, how do we know they really wanted to stop? It's like, because they're saying red. It's pretty clear.
How
do we know what they wanted to do? Well, look at their texts and their emails. It's, their FetLife messages. There's a lot of communication that goes on with us.
Speaking of red and safe words, now, is that part of or talked about in the new model penal code?
Yes, it's so exciting. They actually enshrine our safe words in the model penal code on sexual assault. It's section 213.10, explicit prior permission. And there's three criteria, basically. You have to have a safe word. No matter what, even if you're doing consensual non-consent, even if you're not intending to, you're agreed, like you're doing rape play or something like that, master slave, long-term relationships, no matter what, legally, you have to have a safe word. You have to have an escape hatch. The law does not look at sex like it's a roller coaster. You really can get off at any time. And even though we understand ethically, it's very possible to have a consensual non-consent scene, a relationship. If you're looking to protect yourself legally, you need to have a safe word. And people need to stop saying that you don't have a safe word with consensual non-consent, because that is just completely false. I see that a lot among predators on FetLife.
Yeah, I absolutely. Let's see. I've got some links. I should have mentioned this to begin with. I've got some links listed in the show notes that's got some videos from the American Law Institute or a video. There's 3 links, one to the ncsfreedom.org consent counts number 2 posting that was made, and the Alley Advisor, which is the American Legal Institute or Law Institute, for sexual assault evolution of the Model Penal Code, that goes into detail about it. So if you want to read the whole thing, you can definitely check that out. And I followed one of those links and found this section 213.10, explicit prior permission preventing criminal prosecution of activities that are truly consensual and do not result in serious injury. Permission is explicit when it is personally given orally or by written agreement, along with, and these are the 3 factors that you stated, and I'd like to jump into these. Number 1, specifying that the actor may ignore the other party's expression of unwillingness or other absence of consent. What does that mean?
That's role play. That means that, we can do rape play. We can say no. We can say stop. We can do kidnapping scenes. We can, have long-term relationships that restrict, your ability to do certain things, and you can protest and it still happens. So that covers a ton of role play. And I think it acknowledges the fact that, we can say no and stop, but we really do want it to go on. That's kind of part of the fun of it.
I love that this is actually written. Oh my God. This shows more growth than anything that we've seen probably since the decriminalization of homosexuality.
It is, and it rests completely on Lawrence v. Texas, completely, because that was adults' right to privacy. And if we hadn't had Lawrence v. Texas, we wouldn't be able to have made these strides. It is all just like a brick on top of another brick. But this is, yes, I share your excitement.
Ben in the chat room says, finally, this is so awesome. Because I know that's one of the particular role plays, if I'm not mistaken, that Ben is really into, as am I. Mayfair enjoys CNC as well. So this gives us 213.10 part A says that as long as we've agreed beforehand that somebody can't just come along and say, oh, because they're saying no. Yeah, they're saying no, but they're not saying their safe word. Part B, identifying the specific forms and extent of force, restraint, or threats that are permitted.
Super important. This is kind of our informed consent. So you can't just say, you're out on a date. Hey, I'm kind of kinky. Are you kinky? Sure. I kind of like that a little bit. Go home and then suddenly have a hand around your throat, right? That is the classic rough sex defense is, oh, well, they're kinky. So of course they should have been up for anything, right? We know that's not true. That is not true. When you're kinky, it's actually very specific what you want to do with each person that you're with. So what this is saying is that you need to actually opt in your negotiations. You can no longer say, oh, anything but. It's like, no, that's not a negotiation legally. A negotiation is, all right, I'm up for a little spanking, a little hair pulling, and maybe some oral sex tonight. And the other person's like, oral sex would be good, but on me, not you. And okay, I could do that. You know what I mean? You have to negotiate the sex involved. You have to negotiate the kink involved. And you can say, all right, whipping, but no marks. That's like the intensity. Like, for example, some people say, oh, I like face slapping when I'm having sex. Well, if somebody slaps your face so hard that you dislocate your jaw, when they said, I want light face slapping, that's also a classic loophole that predators use. They take what you say you can do and then do it so hard that you really don't want it, right? Because they're looking to hurt people. And that's also illegal. You have to be able to, you really have to have informed consent. So you really do have to thoroughly negotiate what you're going to do, how hard it's going to be. Oh, that stingy whip, not that thuddy whip, right? And you got to do it first. You got to do it before you start, because once you start stimulating somebody, then everything else is off the table, because at that point, the law sees that you are using force and restraint on someone. You could coerce somebody into doing more. And that's a classic consent violation. Somebody renegotiating in the middle of the scene to add things in, or the scene's done and it's suddenly like, oh, I need a little aftercare. And, ooh, you turn me on so much, I can't restrain myself. How about sex? And the person is there spinning in subspace. Of course they'll say yes. But they're not in their right mind to be able to say yes. So this encompasses all of that. You have to negotiate. You have to do it before you start, not in the middle. And you have to negotiate the sex as well as the kink. We're really good at negotiating kink. In our last consent violation survey, we found that 55% of the violations were actually sexual assault, because we forget to negotiate touching the breasts, touching the genitals, what kind of penetration is allowed. And that should be just as much a part of our negotiations as the kink.
Yeah, that's something. You hit on two things there. Excuse me. You hit on two things there that, with the last one and that being sexual assault and people not considering it. Well, we just had this big scene and we were playing, and then we had some cuddles and aftercare, and I just happened to slip a finger or whatever in whichever direction, and so it should be okay. Well, that may have been okay for the scene, but aftercare is not the time for that to begin with. And anybody, because this does lend more to the 101 side of things, anybody that as you said, that is trying to renegotiate during aftercare is trying to violate. And I think that's a blanket statement that I typically don't like blanket statements, but in this case, I think it's absolutely true. So I want to come back to what we're talking about here with the prior consent, because I have a contract question. But before we do that, let me go ahead and hit part C here under the MPC 213.10 or .10. Part C, stipulating the specific words or gestures. God, I love that will withdraw permission.
Yay. And further down in the commentary, there's a whole lot of commentary after the model law itself. They actually acknowledge these are safe words. They acknowledge NCSF working with community groups to create this, because they don't want to make it look like they're imposing something on us. It really did come from us. It came from our communities. We really did make change in the most fundamental way.
So to break this down into simple words, stipulating the specific words or gestures. Now I'm big, Mayfair, she goes nonverbal, kinda. It's not so much nonverbal as it is just difficulty in finding words. She may want to say a color, but it'll come out potato. I don't, But
it's so true. I mean, same thing for me. Like when I'm in subspace, it's I'm not communicating. You know what I mean? That's you're almost disassociated. That's kind of the definition of what's happened to you. So sometimes it is hard to say a safe word, especially if somebody gives you a safe word. A safe word should not be given to you. It should be your own. It should be something that will rise naturally. I mean, these ideas of like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, you know what I mean? It's like, again, that's a loophole people are looking for to keep you from being able to communicate.
That meme that says if she's shouting rhubarb, watermelon, broccoli, cauliflower, she's probably forgotten the safe word. Yeah. Mayfair, you had something?
I was just going to say, an ex and I were talking about trying some kink things, and he wanted the safe word to be Eiffel Tower. And he was going to be the top. And I was like, why? That doesn't even make sense. And he's like, because in history, French surrendered often, so I take that as you're surrendering. I'm like, I'm not going to remember that in the middle of a heated moment. You're going to have to stop if I say red.
Wow.
Like, no. That's crazy.
That's like, I think that's a sign of somebody trying to control too much. They're not looking at doing a scene with you, They're looking, we see that with people who are predators. They have the same scene over and over, no matter who they're with. Whereas most of us, it's different depending on who we're with, because we're coming together and creating something together. So that whole thing of imposing your own, I don't like that at all.
Yeah. Ben says, all my subs are required to choose their own safe word before I'll play with them. Excellent.
Yay, excellent.
And that's how it should be, in my humble opinion. Okay, so to go back to what I said about contracts, identifying in number or part B here, identifying the specific forms and extent of force, restraint, or threats that are permitted, and C, stipulating the specific words or gestures. If you're interested to learn about gestures, go to culturescript.com/silent communication for an article that I wrote explaining how to use the number system 1 through 5, but using these gestures that will withdraw the permission. So immediately that brings up contracts. Now, it used to say, what is a BDSM contract? And the joke there was it's evidence.
Yes,
Court of
that
law.
was true.
But that doesn't sound like it's true anymore.
No, because we, so many of us use contracts, use checklists, right? Use written communication to negotiate. We needed to fix that because when BDSM was criminalized, you have a contract and it shows you're agreeing to do all these things. That's proof against the top that they're doing these things to the sub. It's technically criminal to do those kinds of things. Consent is not a defense under case law. Evidence, right? Now we've completely flipped that on its head by saying verbal or written communication. Contracts can now be introduced as a defense or as on behalf of a survivor who says, well, this is what we had agreed to do. And then this is what happened. I have injuries that are completely different from this. It says no slapping in here. I got slapped in the face, right? Then it would be kind of used as evidence. But otherwise for tops, it's actually protection. It lays out exactly what you've agreed to. We've seen the benefit of contracts in places like family court or divorce cases where one person is trying to say, oh, well, I didn't really want to be doing that. You know what I mean? I wasn't the kinky one. They were the kinky one. And then you can bring the contract in and show, well, you know, it was really pretty well thought out. And in those cases, we've seen it actually be very helpful to people who've been challenged and kind of claim, oh, it was all one-sided. We're going to start seeing the same thing happen in criminal court, that the contracts are brought in and it's like, this is clarifying what the basis of the relationship was. And then they can look at the evidence, physical injury, texts afterwards, you know, witness, you know, going to a hospital or having a nurse look at something. And then you can look at the hard evidence based on that. So contracts are going to be helpful in every way now.
So
To that, I've got to.
it sounds like now would be a really good time to really start not just verbally agreeing to things, but have that documentation just for everybody's safety.
It really is. It really is. In fact, if you have a phone call and decide you're going to have a scene, especially with somebody kind of new to you, first few scenes, you should text them and say, okay, we're going to meet tonight. We've agreed to these 3 things. No marks. You know, I'm really looking forward to it. My safe word is rutabaga. And, and then you've got it in text. And so that shows you're conforming to this legal framework. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be really helpful for us to have that. And I did want to say, you know, for the safe word, some people might want to agree if I just say stop. You know what I mean? That part A doesn't really apply. If I say stop or no, that I'm, you know, I want everything to stop. And you can put that in a text as well, so that it's actually making it very clear that, you know, if somebody's waiting for red forever, you know what I mean? And you're saying, no, stop. It's not a game for you in terms of a role play game in that way. A lot of people like to just like to communicate in ordinary language.
I think from a psychological standpoint, people need to, if they're in therapy, if they're dealing with some past issues, and I've learned this from my wife and partner of 21 years, that when we play Primal, which is about the only type of play that she and I will do, that's no or stop. That is her safe word. Because that is bringing the power totally back to her in a way that saying the word red or rutabaga or watermelon just won't do. And I think that needs to be pointed out, and people need to have a conversation about that and think about, the reasons that they're doing what they're doing. But that's my 20 years in psych and diving into that as well.
Right. It's that part C is just set up to make sure you can communicate. And you can stop what's happening at any time. And you have to work that out ahead of time. Yeah. And that's up to the people involved.
Mayfair, that was a good thing to bring up. Do you have anything else? Make sure you feel free to jump in at any point with.
I did.
Okay. All right. Yep. All right. So, wow, I'm kind of blown away and about all of these changes. And I know that sounds a little maybe over the top to some people, but if it does, then you're not understanding just how big this really is. As part of the writing, there was something else that I wanted to get into of these links that you had sent me. And survivors who are sexually assaulted during kink activities also may now be covered by rape shield laws, meaning that their prior sexual behavior with others generally can't be used as evidence, reducing exposure to possible stigma attached to kink activities. And it kind of goes into detail, but in a little more layman terms, rape shield and what it does for us.
Well, rape shield laws are really important because historically, what would happen if somebody accused another person of rape? The defense attorney would bring in all sorts of evidence about your past, people you'd had sex with, parties you'd gone to, short skirts you'd worn. You know what I mean? They really wanted to prove that you were sexually promiscuous. And so this couldn't have been rape. More likely it was just, some sex.
So this is something that really helps protect, everybody in general, but of course my first thought is going to sex workers because, you can't rape a hooker. I can't tell you how many people I've heard say that, but
yeah, you absolutely can.
So rape shield laws,
sexually assault them. Yeah.
So rape shield laws are something that I imagine
is supposed to. I wish they helped sex workers more. I got to tell you, if we're stigmatized, the sex workers are the only group of people that are having to fight just as hard as we are for their rights. Mm-hmm. And that's a real issue. But you know what? There's lots of great groups that are now fighting for that, which is great. But with the rape shield law, we find that a lot of people didn't want to report an assault. Say you agreed to a caning and somebody's caning you, and then they start really hurting you, and you try to say your safe word, you try to say stop, you try to crawl to get away, the person keeps hitting the back of your legs, the bottom of your feet, right? That is considered assault. That is not considered sexual assault. So under assault laws, there is no survivor anonymity. There is no victim anonymity. If you take them to court, your name was out there in the media. And so a lot of kinky survivors would not want to report because there was no protection. If there was any kind of sexual contact with the breasts or the genitals, then it could fall under sexual assault laws. And then what they would do is they would bring in, look at your FetLife profile and look at who's your master and who's your second play partner. You know what I mean? And they would just expose so much that nobody wanted to undergo that. So it was very important that we bring kink under the umbrella of the rape shield laws, because that means the only things that can be considered are what pertain to your relationship with this person. How you met them, the interactions, the history that you've had. That can all be called in, your negotiations, but they can't bring in your master's other sub, you know what I mean? And try to shame you into dropping the case, which is really what it was. So rape shield laws are great. we do not want to exclude. There's been a misapplication of the rape shield laws in cases in the past. In the Jovanovic case, they actually used, the prosecutor was so desperate to get a prosecution that they excluded all the communications between the people themselves, all the negotiations that had gone on for months and months. And she was able to get up on the stand and pretend that she wasn't kinky. And it's like, if they could have just introduced their negotiations, they would have seen she was driving this just as much as he was. So that was a misapplication of the rape shield law. You have to allow that, but you don't want to bring in her master and her other play partners.
That blows me away. I mean, what kind of judge wouldn't allow the communication between the two people involved to, anyway?
It was a miscarriage
Maxie,
of justice, and he was in Rikers Island for years. It was really not fair.
and that's not a easygoing little place to be, from what I hear. Jesus. Maxie in the chat room asks, how far, and Maxie is a producer of the show, so thank you so much. How far has this framework been implemented, and are there notable holdout states in the implementation of it?
This is a great question. We've actually just gotten this in June of 2021, and the ALI has published the parts that are finished and been voted on and approved, and our explicit prior permission is one of those. But they are still working on the Sex Offender Registry. They're trying to kind of uniformalize the, I don't know if that's a word, but, you know, talk about lots of different sex offender registries. It's not working the way it should, because they have really low level things like people stopped for cruising or peeing in a public park on that sex offender registry.
Mm-hmm.
And then other people who are real serious predators, the states aren't sharing a lot of information. So a lot of times they slip through the cracks, and they can move into a neighborhood they're not supposed to be in. So the sex offender registry really needs to be fixed. Once that's fixed, the ALI will publish it, right? And that's when states will start taking it up to consider if they want to adopt it. And what NCSF is doing is we did a ton of legislative research on all the states. We didn't want to start in a state where we were going to get bad press on explicit prior permission, or the state legislature would just completely, you know, not go for it. So we wanted to pick states where it would be very beneficial to start, and there was a positive environment. So we've picked out Washington State, Maryland, and New York State. And so we are already starting, like, for example, we did a Seton Hall Law Hall event. We're trying to do events in those target states to educate the attorneys, to kind of lay the groundwork, right? To educate. We've done a ton of already education of victim advocacy agencies. For example, in Maryland, we want to work with the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault. If they need to support this, you know, if they don't support this, it's not going to go anywhere in Maryland. Right. So we've been already trying to, we do all kinds of things. We help sponsor them. We help support them so they support us. And so we're in the process of doing that right now. We hope to start in those 3 states in 2023 lobbying. It starts in January. And what we will need to have is groups in each of those states get the information out to their members, because the members are going to have to write to their legislators. And they don't have to out themselves as kinky, but they can just support the entire model penal code on sexual assault and say, we really need this newest sexual assault law, right? The more people who are writing to the legislators, the more influence we'll have, and hopefully the states will adopt it. We're hoping these first 3 states adopt it, at least the explicit prior permission part, as well as some other parts of the model penal code. And then we'll have a positive trajectory. We'll be able to start picking up speed and doing this in other states as well. But it's going to be a campaign. It's going to take a while. But
just to reiterate, what were those 3 states? Washington State, Maryland, and
New York.
New York. Okay.
And meanwhile, because it replaces the case law, we have introduced it in sexual assault cases in New Mexico, in a domestic violence case in Tennessee. So it can be introduced in other states. So definitely we want everybody, if you know of somebody that has experienced a sexual assault and wants to try to report it, or if you know somebody who's been accused of sexual assault in a kink context, they need to get this. They need to start introducing this, because the more people who introduce this in court and we start really kind of referencing it, the more strength it will have.
So, and that brings me to asking the question. You said in these 3 states where we're going to need people to start sending the letters to representatives and contacting their government officials to make sure that these are taken in. Is there any advantage to waiting until basically you sound the trumpet for?
Yeah, definitely. We want to have we want to have the policy document. We want to be able to send it to all the legislators, and then we want the voices in the community to speak up. And the policy document doesn't just cover explicit prior permission. We actually compare their current sexual assault law with the model sexual assault law, and we point out different places where it will improve their laws. So yeah, we want to be able to get that out, and then we want voices to rise up. So we're going to be sending out, you're going to be seeing blasts. We're going to be saying, everybody in Maryland, please go here. And we'll have like a form set up where you can do that and create your own letter or use some of our sample language to just make it really easy for people.
Yeah. Yeah. Trickling voices in one at a time versus an entire group of people with megaphones just blasting to the rafters. Hey, we need this, do this. Yeah. And that was why I asked the question. So what about the other states? Do you want other states to kind of wait in the meantime as well until that is called for, or will it kind of roll out pretty quickly after these 3 get going?
Yeah, I would wait because, but if anybody really wants to volunteer, feel free. We have a committee structure in NCSF, so our consent counts committee. We meet once a month, and on our volunteer form, we actually give the date and the time. So you can see if it fits your schedule. You could volunteer and just say, hey, I want to be a point person in my state. Once you get to my state, great. So yeah, I think the big thing that we're trying to do right now is educating the kinky and polyamorous folks. That's kind of our big push, is to have our communities do, which is why we're talking. We just got to get the word out so people realize that this is in place and will affect them. And so that's where our attention is right now, with doing a bit of this legwork in these 3 states right now.
Excellent. I love giving people a game plan so they know exactly where we're headed.
Yeah.
Sounds like
right,
I need to contact the cousin up in Washington State.
Yeah. Mayfair's got a cousin that's part of a council that runs a dungeon.
Oh, fabulous.
So,
that's what we need. Get them in touch with me. Yay.
I'm not in the United States, but I'm really happy to hear about this. 80 says.
Yeah, what we want to do is we want to adapt this to other countries' sexual assault law. It is what we need is just people in those countries who are interested, like often an attorney, a retired judge who wants to work with us on this. For example, NCSF currently has 2 international board members. We have someone from Canada and someone who's living in the European Union.
Well,
So
that's what I was about to ask. 80 is in Canada, I believe. So, we've always operated pretty closely with Canada in some things as much as possible. So do you see this spreading to the north anytime soon? I know it's hard to.
Yeah, I would like that. They have actually better laws around kink in Canada than we do here. So we're kind of playing catch up, but certainly, and they actually definitely have better anti-discrimination laws against people who are polyamorous and kinky. So Canadians are in a pretty good position, but we always looking for liaisons there who can take our information to groups. We're always looking for people who can do outreach to groups and say, NCSF's got this information. We can do virtual workshops on this. We can do in-person workshops. And so we actually have coalition partners who are groups that are the Canadian Polyamory Advocacy Association is a coalition partner of NCSF, and the Alberta Alternative Sexual Sexuality Center is also. So yeah, we really are trying to extend our reach because we need to work together. There's a lot of common issues that we face. And we have our kink and polyamory, our professionals database that has tons of international professionals, but definitely a Canadian. So like if you wanted a therapist or an attorney to help you who is kink and polyamory aware, that's a really helpful resource.
Yeah, I've been meaning to look into that and ask you. I mean, I talk about it at least every third show. It comes up. So that you do have international providers on there?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
We're tracking it as well. It's up to I think 2,500 professionals right now, and we're getting more every day. And
Excellent.
we do this because honestly, in other countries, it's sometimes even more important that you have a kink and polyamory aware professional assist you. And it can be dangerous for some of these professionals. They're really, they're blazing a path for us. It's our most visited page on our website. Is people coming there to get resources, webmasters, wedding officiates, mediators. People really need mediators.
Mayfair? I just saw you unmute, so I thought you were okay. Let's see. There was one thing that I pulled out of this, and then I'm pretty much just going to completely open the floor up to you, Susan. And chat room, please do get your questions in so that we can get those answered. But something that I was reading in there that I felt needs explanation, and I've already addressed this with you, but for others who may be reading through this, because I did post the links for people to be able to see it with their own eyes. This one section kind of stuck out to me as like, wait, and I had to go back and reread this section again. But it says the new model penal code on sexual assault includes a general definition of consent for sexual activity in which consent may be inferred from behavior, both action and inaction. So that the way that you're acting, you don't have to use your words. You can give consent. And it says in the context of all circumstances. Now, that goes into what a lot of people feel leads to misinterpretation. Just because I act a certain way, and just because I have an erection doesn't necessarily mean that I'm accepting of someone touching it or oral sex or whatever. But somebody else may infer from that behavior and action that I want that. So explain that part of it.
That's the definition, the general definition of consent that was agreed upon in 2016. And that's the definition of consent for just sex. This does not apply to sex with kink. Use of force or restraint means a much higher affirmative level of consent, explicit prior permission. But since this was 2016 that the American Law Institute approved this, that was before Me Too. And I think that this reflects kind of an older standard of consent to sex. And I think that if they were to readdress this now, they might have a more affirmative stance. They didn't want to be, the American Law Institute doesn't like to lead. They like to reflect where society is. And unfortunately, that's where we were in 2016. And we've become more enlightened very fast. So what NCSF is doing is in our public policy briefs that we're going to be giving to legislators, we say this is not an affirmative definition of consent. For the states that don't have any definition of consent, it's a huge step forward. But for states that want to go even further, we offer them an alternative, a more affirmative consent model, where you actually do have to verbalize and talk about it before you do it. I think that's the way that we're headed. It may be that there's certain progressive states that want to adopt that. New Jersey is very progressive in terms of their telling their colleges and universities they have to have affirmative consent, and they may. So it depends on where you're at. But yeah, we do offer a more affirmative consent model that people can just switch out. A legislator who sponsors a bill could do the entire model penal code on sexual assault and swap out the consent definition to something that's a little bit more affirmative. And
Right.
it may be that when working with sexual assault coalitions, they'll want to do that. And we support that completely because, of course, we're into affirmative consent. We're into people talking to each other. I mean, I think I saw it was a poll, and it was asking men, do you get consent from non-verbally? And it was like 70%. Yes, I get consent non-verbally. And then they asked women, do you give consent non-verbally? And it was like 10% said that they give consent non-verbally. Like that is a huge, huge area where all sorts of, mistakes can happen.
Wow.
And
I
so
never would have guessed that difference would be so great. Sorry to
A little
interrupt.
bit of a gap.
it's huge.
Yeah.
And how can you? I mean, like, I don't know about you, but body language is hard. People who say that they get consent through body language, it's like, somebody freezes or laughs. I mean, like when you look at trauma response that people have, we used to have groups saying, well, they were laughing. They said it was no big deal. It's like, well, that's actually a common trauma response for somebody to have to try to deny what happened. So, if you're having that kind of response and somebody's looking at you, they might think everything's fine from your body language because it's a defensive mechanism. So we have these defensive mechanisms that is really easy to misinterpret. But think of how many people come into our communities and they're just nonverbal. They're just so excited to be here and yeah, anything you want. And we're like, you got to be able to talk about it before you do it. Right? We're teaching people how to talk about their desires, their limits. They're figuring out that they have limits and boundaries, how to enforce those limits and boundaries. It's a big disservice in America that we do not have consent education for, age appropriate all the way to just teach people about how to actually talk about what they want and don't want. And they can practice it on hugs. And then by the time you get to oral sex, you might be a little more comfortable talking about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I love going to the Maryville Munches, which Maryville is the town that I live in, because it's such a beautiful bouquet of questions with consent, non-consent, answers that are freely given with no problem whatsoever. Everybody, even people that because Mayfair has massive boundaries. These are hard coded, implemented, and it's a big bubble. And everybody, oh, hey Mayfair, can I hug you? And they know that it doesn't matter that last week they were able to. This week it may be a different answer because today's a different day. This is a different moment. And I love the fact that they are all like that is implemented so freely and there's no judgment on it. I just love this community for that. But all right. Sorry, go ahead. Did you?
Okay, no, I was just saying, I do. I like that. I think that we're helping people, in terms of their exploration. That's one reason I love this community. It's a self-exploration. That's why I get so angry when I see some people say, well, if you were a good sub, you'd do this, or I'm the master, this is how it's done. And that's unfortunately how a lot of people are introduced to kink. And it's completely the opposite. It's a self-motivated exploration. And I know it's helped me, not just in my sex life, but it helped me in my career. It really empowered me in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I've definitely made a lot of changes. Aside from the current issues where I've dealt with death, but just from being in the community, I'm so much more open just about my own body. Even when Coldren and I first met, I wouldn't have been on this show. I wouldn't have been on here talking to people about how I felt about any of this. There's no way. That was very private. I didn't even want to talk to him about it. And now it's like, hey, we had sex the other day and did da 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 da, and I'm like, who did I become? Where did that girl come from?
Yeah, the only reason why she wears the mask is because of a morality clause where she is a representative of her corporation 24/7, 365.
Oh,
And
and you know I really wish that we could stop that at some point. Now that we've changed this and it's no longer criminal, and we worked with the American Psychiatric Association, and they said we're not mentally ill, because that was the big things that they had against us, was that we were sick or we were violent. And now we have the two main institutions here in America that are saying, no, they're not sick or violent. They are mentally healthy as a whole, and they're doing this legally if they follow explicit prior permission. And I think that with that, we'll start to hopefully see people, the discrimination stopping. I mean, like 80% in our surveys are closeted to coworkers. It's not unusual. And so, I mean, it's really sad. 20% are closeted to their own partners.
Yeah,
what does that tell you? You know, like,
that's terrible.
a ton of stigma that we need to fight. And, you know, that stigma has real repercussions. People who are operating under shame and feeling bad about who they are, you have more mental health issues, because like you have PTSD, you can have suicide ideation, you can have this outside pressure that pushes on you where it's not coming from within. You know, it's outside pushing in, and that can be a real problem for us. So that's one reason why we're fighting this so much, that stigma has such an impact, and people can't get the help that they need. Like if they want to talk to a doctor or a therapist about a relationship issue that is not necessarily kink, but you got to talk about your kink in order to talk about your relationship. You know, we have people trying to get help without explaining what it is that they're doing. And it's just, that's not fair. We shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah. I've experienced that with my own personal doctor. So my general practitioner, that it's very Bible Belt, but she still sees me. She's like, no, I don't want to talk about that. But when I go in and I'm like, okay, I need to get an updated, you know, STD, STI panel done. And she'll just, which ones do you want? Same ones that I always want, full panel. Okay.
Yeah. And think about that. That has a psychological impact on you, that kind of disapproval, that kind of attempt to shame, you know? It's
and it's still well, what does your wife think about that? You were her doctor too for a long time, until you quit taking insurance and things changed. So you know, you've got her number. Feel free to call her and ask her. I'll sign a consent form for it. But Maxie says my closet 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 kept getting smaller and smaller. Yeah. Just recently started, well, not recently, but started coming out to work and to family and children, and about her transition. So very proud of Maxie. Very proud.
Yes.
Oh, Bad Cat. Hello, Bad Cat. I've read the Maine assault legislation. There is no consent exception. Why are sports like boxing and martial arts apparently privileged, and why isn't BDSM also privileged?
That is a great question. And the answer is that in America, we are a Puritan-based country. And so sex, you know, all these blue laws that we had against any kind of sexual interaction, you know, we fought against obscenity, quote unquote, for many, many, many decades. And that's just porn. I mean, like there was like a giant action against porn for a long time. And kinky porn producers were the last ones being arrested. Max Hardcore, I don't know if anybody remembers him, but he's one of the last victims of the obscenity wars. So there is a general anti-sex sentiment in our legal system. And so, you can beat somebody up in boxing, you can football, you can give them concussions and affect the rest of their life. But you can't drip hot wax on somebody according to old case law, or use a riding crop on somebody according to old case law. And it really is just morality. People trying to tell other people how they can have sex. It's the same reason that homosexuality was outlawed, right? And it took until shamefully recent for that to change.
Right.
And that had to change. Lawrence v. Texas had to fight the sodomy laws, the anti-sodomy laws, that people in the privacy of their own homes could not have oral sex or anal sex, right? Crazy, the reach that the American government wanted over how people were conducting their lives. And so we are beating that back inch by inch. Literally, we've been doing this for 25 years. This is our 25th anniversary, and we've been fighting this hard all those years. And it's not just for like our personal rights, but we've had to really fight for our ability to gather. We've had several running campaigns where groups like Americans for Truth about homosexuality or the Concerned Women for America tried to shut down series of our conferences. And, you know, we had to fight tooth and nail by using letter writing campaigns to have our folks write, you know, send and these hotel chains and tell them, I'm not going to stay there if you continue to discriminate against this group. And we use the power of the people to make sure that we can still have these giant conferences. Otherwise, if NCSF hadn't been here to help organize that and the community members hadn't spoken up, we would not have all these amazing conferences that we can go to. They would have just quietly shut us down and not let us do this. So every step of the way, we have had to fight for our rights. Nobody else is fighting for us. NCSF, like I'm a volunteer. We are all volunteers here. It's dozens of people who are just dedicated to making sure that we're not discriminated against and that we can live our lives the way we want to live it.
So there was a lot of things to point out with what you just said. And I just want to tell people, go to ncsfreedom.org, sign up for the newsletter, because I'm going to imagine that's when the call outs are going to come, or the shout outs, the calls to action saying, now's the time, go get them. And as you've just heard, they work. I've been a part of several writing letters. In fact, it's kind of a joke between me and my wife. I'm just going to have to write a letter. But it works when it's done in a massive group. The voice, you become that squeaky wheel, and they've got to grease you somehow. So definitely watch out for that time by signing up for the newsletter. And it's not spam. I will attest to that. There's something interesting in every edition of the newsletter that I get. I never pass it up, and I don't feel like it. No, there's always something important there for me. So, all right. Well, I know you said that you got to be out by 4, so I want to dive one more time into the main purpose of the visit, which, of course, explaining everything that we've talked about is getting into explicit prior permission. And one more time, let's hear exactly why we should start. I assume this is the term that you want everybody to start using, to go away from safe, sane, consensual, rack, prick, all of these, and stick with the and I keep explicit prior permission. So
right. EPP.
Yeah,
as much as I love SSC, you know, I was an SSC girl from way back, but EPP is something that we just need to explain to people. Explicit prior permission for consent to any kind of kink with sex. You have to negotiate the kink, the sex. You have to negotiate a way to stop at any time, whether that's just saying stop or a safe word. You have to talk about what you're going to do. You opt in, and you talk about how hard it's going to be, how intense it's going to be. And you know, if you want to do a role play, you have to talk about that, like what kind of words you're going to use in the role play, so that there's no miscommunication happening. Mm-hmm. And you can do this verbally, you can do this in writing, but it has to be the two people or more who's involved. It can't be on behalf of somebody.
Yeah. And that I was negotiating with somebody who excellent communicator. but was talking about humiliation, degradation, name calling, these types of things in the middle. And it was just an impact scene, but I get very primal, passionate, will include a mixture of types of play. And they say, you know, you can call me a bitch. You know, in fact, please call me a bitch, but do not call me a fucking bitch, because that will set me off. And being so specific in that, and, you know, you don't call me a slut, but you can call me a whore.
Right.
And, you know, and both of these real examples by the same person, and being that specific. And had she not, because, you know, I've got some partners that want degraded as much as possible. So throwing all the bad, naughty words out there in a series, pop, 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 is a very common thing for me to do. And including that, well, you know, dirty fucking bitch. No, that's not okay for her, because I put the F-bomb in there. So I think being so specific, and change is hard, but it's good. And I think if people will grab on to the change of calling it explicit prior permission as your way of negotiation, then it can trigger, oh yeah. I'm not calling it SSC or prick or rack or any of these things anymore. This is what I'm calling it. And that is an automatic reminder in my, you know, I've trained myself to remember, negotiate deeper, go farther than I think I should in that negotiation. There's no stupid questions kind of thing. So,
Right.
Yeah. All right. What else? Is there anything else that we didn't get into that you want to get into? Again, you've got the floor. So.
Well, this is great. You told everybody to sign up for the newsletter. That's a great idea. We send out a quarterly newsletter, and twice a month we send out media updates, which is articles about kink and non-monogamy, and it also includes the NCSF news. So we'll definitely be letting you know. So it's not a high traffic. So you can go there and sign up. It's under our blog. You can also, you know, go to our website. We have tons of resources there for people. We have the prevalence survey that found 30% of people engage in spanking. A lot of people like that. We are creating new infographics so that people can share the infographics about explicit prior permission. You can find those on our blog as well, and also our CAP list. So you can find our volunteer form. We love getting volunteers. If you want to volunteer for our committees, that would be great. So yeah, you can encourage your group to join NCSF, because the more groups we have who belong, the more feedback we get that comes directly from you through your group to us. So we really, really love, especially right now, we really need to network the communities together, because this has been hard. The pandemic has definitely killed a few groups and big events that have been around for decades. So we need to work together, and our coalition partners, we have our coalition partner town hall every quarter, and we're sharing information about opening up and what's working and what's not working. We did that every month early on because we wanted to share information about going virtual. So we were really sharing information among the groups about what was successful and what was not. So it's very important right now, more than ever, that we all work together. So anything you can do, we've got all kinds of brochures out there. We've got the Got Consent for Kink, Got Consent for Non-Monogamy, and it kind of goes over the explicit prior permission, the legal stuff. So if you even just wanted to, you know, order some free brochures and put them out at your group, that's super helpful, because it helps spread the word for somebody who might be having a child custody issue or a sexual assault. Know that there's some place that they can come and get help.
And if you're a business owner, it doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. This is a very reputable organization that is fighting for people's rights, and there's no shame in throwing up some brochures or cards or something.
Yeah. Businesses can be a coalition partner as well. We understand there's a lot of for-profit businesses that are serving our communities as well. So.
I want to read this comment. This is directed toward you. Ben says, thanks to the hard work and fight of NCSF, those lines are being expanded through info, education, and stigmatized acts and misconceptions of our community. So getting rid of all these things. So he's thanking you for your hard work.
I appreciate it. We're trying to sweep everything, all the old stuff out. And we've just seen the power of our communities. You know, when 50 Shades of Grey hit, it was our communities that spoke up and explained what was really consent and what was really kink. And since then, the media coverage has changed. And that's because we spoke up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're realizing the power of our communities now. And this is an exciting time for us.
Yeah. You said 50 Shades. So did you watch Love and Leashes? I have to ask.
I haven't seen it. I've seen little bits of it because I know some of the people that are in it. And it's super exciting to see some of the Columbus community in that movie.
Wait, is that the Korean movie of Netflix?
Oh,
movie?
You're talking about the Korean movie. I'm talking about.
Isn't that the name of it?
Yeah,
Yes.
no, I have not seen the Korean movie.
Oh, were you talking about Bonding? Bonding, the series?
Bonding is what I was thinking of. Yes.
I was so disappointed that they canceled it because everything that they screwed up in the first season, they fixed in the first 10 minutes of the second season, episode 1. But yeah, no, Love and Leashes it's cute. It's a rom-com focused around BDSM. I highly recommend checking it out.
It's Korean?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Korean. In fact,
it was something you were talking about earlier made me think of it, talking about the pressure from relationships about having to be hidden, because that comes up in that too. And it shows a very real like reaction of how people would feel if they weren't met openly when they shared their kink.
Yeah. And an abuse situation that was,
I
mean, it ticks almost all the boxes, and it's interesting that Korea can get it right and America can't when it comes to.
That is absolutely fascinating. I mean, I love that. I watched like the Squid Game. I think that they're coming out with really innovative work. So yeah, I will watch that this week.
Yeah, let me know what you think. What do you do? Maxie says, is there a merch channel, stickers, t-shirts, etc. for the NCSF?
Yes, we have a cafe press shop, and you can find it on our website under Get Involved, and you can shop there. You can get an NCSF t-shirt. You can get a Got Consent t-shirt that actually doesn't even have the NCSF logo on it. So people can wear it out in their vanilla world, and it works just perfect. We got pins.
You get pins to put on your hat or vest or shirt or bag.
And you know what? We have our 25th anniversary pin that's going to come out here pretty soon. So everybody who has the other pins are going to want that.
Yeah, I'll be needing to get one of those. So
send you one.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Well, anything else? Any final thoughts? Any last? I know this is round 2 of that question, but I just want to make sure that you've hit on every point that you came here to talk about. So
yeah, I think so. I really appreciate having a whole hour to talk about explicit prior permission. I think it's great to go so in depth on this.
Yes.
I really appreciate it.
I think it's needed. And Susan, anytime you want to come back, anytime that you have something, a message, or hey, if you just want to sit down and chat about something, let us know. We love and adore you and the work that you've done. I wasn't kidding at the beginning when I said I kind of fanboy out over you, because you are. Mayfair will tell you, yeah, it's you're a rock star in my eyes. The things that you work toward to get accomplished, the hard work. I know it's not easy, and I really thank you just doesn't say enough, but thank you so much for everything that you do. Mayfair, any final thoughts, questions from you with Susan? I know she needs to get on out of here probably.
I just, I like he said, thank you. It's incredible. This new law is going to change a lot of things. I look forward to seeing the good things that happen from it.
Great. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
having me on. So I reached out. I was like, I wanted to definitely talk to you about this. And I'll reach out again once we got some new news. We can all talk about it. Once we start lobbying or we start getting some traction, I'll come on and
Yes.
let y'all
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Get an update. Excellent. All right. Well, I am going to give a rundown here, a thank you special shout out. I do want to include, there was another name that I come across. I know there's so many people that work with the NCSF, but Dick Cunningham, it's my understanding that they put a lot of work into this as well.
Yeah, Dick Cunningham was our legal counsel, and he joined the American Law Institute. He was very helpful to them in other areas of the law, and he is the one who was the point person on negotiating with them about including explicit prior permission. And unfortunately, we lost Dick in November of last year. He died,
Oh,
and
no.
so we are all very much remembering Dick, and he carried the baton across the line. You know what I mean? Like, this was a passion project for him. It was very important to him to make this change, and he did it. And so now we're spreading the word, and yeah, we honor Dick.
Wow. Condolences to all of you and to the family. And
It's a huge
I
loss.
had no idea.
Yeah.
On a happier note, Lady Catherine, which is my wife, she says she's like our community's Wonder Woman. And what I would, if you ever dress up as Wonder Woman,
I do. I actually kind of get out there. It's actually good because I block the attacks, with my little wrist. Get out there and talk to the media. I was just an ordinary Kingster. I got discriminated against practically the moment I stepped foot into the community, and it just got me all riled up. And
wow.
After that, it's history.
See, anybody can help. You just have to step out there and do it. I do want to thank the people that make this possible, the value for value that keeps us going. Pro producer, Buffalo Max. Executive producer, Shadowy Fox, Unicorn's Angel, Johnny Farrell, Haru Webb, Ray Webb, and Anomalous Mats. Senior producers, Trouble 113, Roxy Bear, That Place in Oklahoma City. That is a dungeon. Thank you, Miter. Alexandria, Baby Love, and T-Rex Ties, Sort Out the Kinks, Master Gabriel, Not the Daddy, Otsila, Daddy Steve, Serpent, KJ, Author, Mistress, Black Rose, Upstate SC Couple, Crystal Force, Callie, Perfectly Thick, Odie and CC, Captain J, Savi, AK-47, Mr. Beyond, Curtain Call. Curtain Call is from the Play Space. It's basically BDSM 101 for short attention spans. Submissive K and Trinity Faye, producers at $5 a month. Kane Sin, Hey Dia Sir, and Kitten, Raven, MBR Poodle, Lilac Wine, Bad Dog Bad, Arctic Foxglove, Catnip Meow, Wild Time, and Deacon Sean, Cherry Query, Rope Stuff 2, Rabbit, Just Call Me Ash, Sir Wolf, Archangel, Subx 13, Quartz Dom, Gator, Gizmo, JJ, John Shaw, The Cheshire Ben, Tinker Brat, Brittany, Segment Shadow, Beatrix Kiddo, Solstice, Fetish Artist. Shout out to Fetish Artist at fetishforlife.com, Frozen Moron, Sir Be Nice, Kitten 399, Katie, and 80. Junior producers, K2SO, Morgana 13, Brody, the Gavin Girl Time Podcast, Lexa, Ashley, and Meg. And I think there's been a couple more that's come in the past 2 days that I haven't gotten on the list yet. I'll get you next week, I promise. And thank you so much. If you want to come become one of our producers, you can do that by joining Patreon or giving a PayPal donation. CauldronScript.com/Patreon, CauldronScript.com/PayPal. And part of that donation is going to go to making Cauldron Script Podcast one of the NCSF, what do you call it?
Coalition partners.
Coalition partners. There you go. So I will be putting that donation in on Tuesday. So
Great.
that is going to wrap us up for today. There's a list of vendors that we know, like, trust, and use down below in the description and the show notes. None of those are sponsors. They're just people that we know, like, trust, and use. So please feel free to do that. There are some discount codes down there as well. Mayfair, final thoughts?
Just sign up for the NCSF. Sorry, I get acronyms messed up, but sign
That's
up.
fine.
You guys are doing great work. We all need to support you.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Mayfair.
All right, so we're going to go down the row here. It'll be me and Mayfair, and then Susan. You'll pick it up real quick, Susan. You've done it once before. This has been Master Cauldron and
Mayfair and
Susan.
for cauldronstrip.com. Unearth the truth.
Yay.